There are a ton of new OP builds going around for 26.5 that we'll be covering for you guys in today's video. All of these are super underrated right now, but extremely powerful, so you can look to try them out before everyone else catches on. And just a disclaimer before we get started, we usually try to find at least 2 builds for every role when making these videos, but we don't want to do this if it compromises quality. For instance, right now, there just aren't any new support builds that we can find, so instead of forcing 2 builds that are super uninteresting and probably not even new, we'll cover a few more builds for jungle because there are a ton of new jungle builds that have been popping up lately. And remember, if you're learning new tech, broken builds, or macro and wave control strategies from videos like this one, you're already behind. The issue with YouTube is that it takes a while for us to edit and get content out for you guys as fast as possible. That's why whenever our challenger players discover new tech, broken builds, or game-winning strategies, they post it immediately in our new meta updates course, weeks before you'll ever see it on YouTube, Reddit, or TikTok, so you can get ahead of everyone else. For instance, AP Varus top lane was broken from the very first patch of the season, but the average player didn't discover that until a few weeks later, while skill cap subscribers were notified before everyone else. As a skill cap subscriber, you're also getting access to our newly updated Essentials courses, covering everything you need to master Season 16 from fundamentals to advanced macro, or even our Bronze to Diamond series where we document hard-stuck players using only our content to climb through every rank. And if that wasn't enough already, every single week our challenger players upload 10 full game commentaries breaking down exactly how to carry games on your chosen champion in your elo, explaining every decision in real time. Best of all, you can get access to all this and more completely risk-free, as if you don't climb at least 5 divisions while actively using our service, then you get every penny back. Check out the link in the description below for an exclusive one-time discount completely risk-free today. So for our first and only top lane build that we'll be covering in this video, we have a new one for Ornn that has been on the rise recently. Ornn has been an OP tier top lane champ for a while now, and this new build is providing him even more power. So instead of rushing Sunfire or Hollow Radiance, it's Protoplasm Harness that is winning the most as Ornn's first item. The entire core build is extremely cheap as you're going Jak'Sho second and then Zeke's Convergence third. Protoplasm has been one of the most slept on items all season, and it works so well in combination with Jak'Sho. Jak'Sho ends up amping your resist by 30% when you're in combat, and because the passive heal from Protoplasm scales off your resist, you get a ton of value pairing the items up together. Protoplasm coming in at 2,500 gold and Zeke's costing just 2,200 gold means that you're hitting this 3-item core in almost every single game. There are a plethora of new builds that we have to cover for jungle in 26.5, and first up is one for Shyvana. Shyvana has been a pretty weak jungler to start the season, but this build is single-handedly boosting her win rate by about 4% and turning her into a strong champ. Kraken Slayer is the rush item, you go Dusk and Dawn second, and then Sundered Sky third. So the Kraken with Dusk and Dawn synergy may actually be the most OP synergy in the entire game right now on Shyvana. Reason being is that Shyvana's Q works so that it attacks twice, but then Dusk and Dawn's passive also procs on hit effects twice. So what this means is that when you use Shyvana's Q, you instantly proc Kraken Slayer's passive and instantly proc press the attack. And just to show you that we aren't lying, here's a clip of the build in action in Practice Tool as we use Q on the target dummy, and you can see that PTA and Kraken's passive have been procced. So this is an absolutely godlike synergy as it provides Shyvana with burst and consistent damage potential. Kraken passive does not have a cooldown, while Dusk and Dawn cooldown is only 1.5 seconds, so whenever Shyvana Q is available, she's going to get this instant burst damage off. And then it gets even more silly when you add in Sundered Sky as your third item, because its passive is going to provide lots of upfront damage. We can see here that if we are hitting a target who has 1800 health and 80 resists, which would be similar to what an ADC would have at level 14, we're taking 38% of their health bar with a single Q. And this is literally guaranteed damage as well, since Shyvana Q is point and click, so it takes no skill at all to completely decimate enemy squishy targets with this setup. This may be the most underrated build in the entire game right now and turn Shyvana into a legit pick in meta, so take advantage of it while you can. So we've covered this setup in our recent tier list and solo carry videos, but we wanted to include it in the OP builds video for the patch in case any of you missed those other videos. This setup in question is Protoplasm Harness Shen. And no, this is not for top lane Shen, it's jungle Shen that is absolutely dominating with the item. Xpadu is the Shen main who has popularized this build, and it makes a ton of sense as to why it's so strong for Shen. Shen loves health, as his kit has a bunch of health scaling in it, so with Protoplasm Harness being a very cheap health item at only 2,500 gold, it's the perfect rush for Shen. The entire core build is quite cheap, as you're going Unending Despair or Abyssal Mask second. Whichever item you don't grab second is usually best third. What's super unique about the pick as well is that he's the only jungler who takes Guardian as his keystone rune. Grasp and PTA are being played a bit on Shen jungle, but Guardian has by far the highest win rate out of all keystones being played on him. Guardian value is better on Shen than most junglers because when he uses his R to gank at level 6, he's going to get great use out of it in skirmishes. Shen fits in absolutely amazing in the current jungle meta as he's a great pick into Viego, Graves, Briar, Xin Zhao, and basically any other jungler who relies on auto-attacking to deal their damage in skirmishes. We're finally starting to see Hex Optics picked up a bit more after getting buffed 2 patches in a row, and is looking like a phenomenal phenomenal core item for Kindred. For the longest time, Kindred players have built the Collector as their second item, but Hex Optics is heavily outperforming. At the time of making this video, it's a 3% win rate gap in favor of Hex Optics, and this is definitely partly due to the fact Hex Optics has a lower sample size, but it's still got over 5,000 games as a second item on Kindred, so that's enough to where we can be confident that even if Hex Optics were to see a big play rate spike, it would very likely still have a higher win rate than the Collector. Hex Optics just flat out deals more damage than the Collector when auto-attacking, and because the majority of Kindred's damage is coming from her autos and skirmishes, the item works great for her. The longer the game goes, the more Hex Optics value shoots up because its range amplifier passive and bonus damage amp on autos is going to be so much more valuable than lethality and execute damage from the Collector. If you're already dealing a few hundred damage per auto attack, then the 5% execute from the Collector doesn't really matter at all. A new build that you're going to want to play on Graves for 26.5 consists of rushing Hubris. The reason we're pretty confident Hubris becomes a meta item on Graves for this patch is because it was already winning at a very high rate prior to its buffs. Hubris is buffed this patch so that the cost is down from 3,000 to 2,800 gold. For an item that's all about snowballing, a cost reduction buff is incredible because the earlier you can grab Hubris, the better. We're not entirely sure what the optimal complete core build may look like, but if we were to just swap out Ghostblade for Hubris, then the Collector second and Lord Dom's third would be standard. Ghostblade likely remains a viable rush item for Graves, but in games where you get an early kill and really want to press your advantage, then rushing Hubris makes a lot of sense now. The damage output is always going to be higher with Hubris, so especially in games where the enemy team lacks mobility, where you don't need the movement speed from Ghostblade as much, don't sleep on Hubris for 26.5. And then one more jungle build that we need to cover for 26.5 is an off-meta setup for Trundle. So Trinity Force is the standard rush item for Trundle, but then second item is where you can mix things up. It's usually Dead Man's Plate as the standard second purchase on Trundle, but Vandal Pipes is working incredibly well right now. Vandal Pipes is an item that has been mainly associated with support champions, but there's no reason why it can't be good on champs in other roles. It's a super cheap item, provides defensive stats, and its passive is incredible for Trundle. The issue with Vandal Pipes on some champs is that you actually need to land your CC in order to proc its passive, and sometimes that can be difficult, but for Trundle, it's not an issue in the slightest. Trundle E has such a gargantuan hitbox that you'd literally be trolling not to land it, so you will always proc the Vandal Pipes passive in a skirmish to provide yourself with bonus attack speed and movement speed. This attack speed is also granted to your teammates, so in games where your teammates are more auto attack reliant, let's say you have a Yasuo mid and a Tryndamere top lane, the value from Vandal Pipes as a second item on Trundle is amazing. The new mid lane build that has been on the rise in recent patches revolves around Rocket Belt as a core item on Aurora. So Aurora with Rocket Belt is something that pros are really liking right now, and over the past patch, the play rate of the item on Aurora has spiked from 10% to 27%. So still a relatively underrated item on the champion, with Luden's being the most popular by far. However, the win rate gap between the items is quite big. Rocket Belt Aurora players are winning around 51% of the time as opposed to Luden's players who are down at 49%. Rocket Belt makes a ton of sense on Aurora because it's a cheap health item, and Aurora is a champion who needs to be up close in fights to be effective, so access to cheap health is really nice for her. By rushing Rocket Belt, you're more durable without needing to build a more expensive item like Leandry's, and after going Rocket Belt, you can transition into burstier items like Shadow Flame and Storm Surge. The active dash from Rocket Belt is super valuable for Aurora as well because it often helps her close the gap so that she can get in range to use her burst combo during skirmishes. So we uploaded a video about a week ago to our meta updates course on our website where we provided an extensive breakdown of Hex Optics C44, and one ADC we found is really strong with it is Draven. So the main reason why Draven works so well with Hex Optics is because the majority of his damage is coming from auto attacks. The main difference between the Collector and Hex Optics is that Hex Optics passive provides you with bonus damage on your autos from its passive, whereas the Collector offers up 10 lethality, which will provide your abilities with more damage. The Collector deals more damage early on with abilities, but Hex Optics deals more damage from autos. But since the majority of Draven's damage is all just coming out of his autos from Q, there's so much more benefit to going Hex Optics on him since he's not significantly missing out on higher ability damage from the Collector. The passive on Hex Optics works so that when you get closer than 500 units from your opponent, you will deal less damage, but when testing, we found that even when you are right up next to the enemy, Hex Optics is still dealing more damage from autos than the Collector. Of course, being 500 units away is ideal to reach the max 10% damage amp, but it's not the end of the world if you aren't in terms of dealing more DPS than the Collector. So Bloodthirster Rush into Hex Optics second is a core build that we would recommend you try on your Draven for this patch. Another ADC who is phenomenal with Hex Optics and who you should be rushing the item on for 26.5 is Aphelios. So Aphelios is the ADC who currently has the most egregious win rate gap between Hex Optics and the Collector as rush items. The Collector is only winning 47% of the time on Aphelios, whereas Hex Optics sits up at 50%. Of course, sample size skews this in favor of Hex Optics a bit, but even if Hex Optics had the same play rate as the Collector, we'd expect the win rate to remain at least 1% higher, as there's still 25,000 games a sample for Hex Optics on Aphelios, which is pretty significant. Aphelios is an ADC who scales incredibly well into the mid to late game, so it makes way more sense to prioritize building the item that will scale way better. The Collector just loses loses value the longer games go because lethality gets weaker as a stat, while the bonus damage amp from Hex Optics scales incredible the more items you get, and the bonus range on takedowns is amazing for late game fights. The core build working the best for Felios right now is the exact same one we are seeing on Jinx, with Hex Optics as the Rush, into Phantom Dancer second, and Infinity Edge third. And then one more champion who's amazing with Hex Optics, who's being heavily slept on with the item, is Tristana. In the early game, if you are using your E and R with Trist in a skirmish, then the Collector will deal more damage, but later on, over the course of an extended skirmish where you are auto-attacking a lot more, Hex Optics will win out. So in knowing this, basing your rush item decision on your current lane state is something you should be doing. If you get an early kill in lane and are with an aggro support like Leona, Nautilus, or Blitz, then the value of the Collector is high since you'll be able to take advantage of its early game power. If you're even in lane though, or behind, then opting for the better scaling choice with Hex Optics is the way to go. Hex Optics is going to outdamage the Collector once you get a few items, so you really need to be able to push an advantage with the Collector in order for it to be worth it. In a lane where you don't think you have a ton of kill threat is also where considering Hex Optics over the Collector makes sense. Even if you are with an aggro support, if the enemy is playing Ezreal Janna and they are just playing extremely passive, sitting back in lane and not giving you any openings, then just take Hex Optics in that situation. Alright guys, one last thing, our rank up guarantee is insane. It's like signing up for the gym and getting a refund if you don't get ripped. That's how confident we are in skill cap. We obsess over making the best guides with top players, rigorous testing, and top tier video editing to make your climb easy. If you're ready to level up, visit skillcap.com and see the difference. So there you have it everyone, those are 10 new very powerful builds that you'll want to try for 26.5 if you haven't already. Thank you all so much for watching, we'll see you back soon.